We're getting to that time of year where things heat up out above the water, and sometimes they might slow down under the water. But that might just mean you have to look in different places, try some different presentations. And we're going to talk to Garett Svir right now from Slab Seeker Fishing up in Otter Tail Lakes Country. Garett, how's it going?
Hey, doing good. We've been out trolling crappies and we've been crushing them. We've been beating them up really good.
I wanted to talk to you about that because I have caught crappies trolling before, but when I think of crappie fishing, trolling doesn't always come to mind right away. Is that something you do this time of year? Becomes kind of a midsummer tactic for you?
Yeah, exactly. So I've had a bunch of people reaching out on my social media page and kind of asking too, like, why are you chasing crappies midsummer and how do you find them? Well, in the middle of the summer, the crappies, they move quite a bit. And so an effective way to stay on top of good numbers of fish and to keep getting into them is to troll. And so we're trolling, fairly slowly. Typically the fish are going to be related to those cabbage and those coontail weeds, either on the edge or slightly on top of them. Um, and so we're trolling a 16th or a 32nd ounce jig. One advantage is using something like a beetle spin, because it's got that hairpin style spinner in front of the hook. So you can fish those really weedless and pull those up on top of the weeds and stay pretty weedless with them. We're also using Northland crappie thumpers and like those Roadrunner jigs, tipping them with all kinds of different things. Bobby Garland baby shads, white twister tails, different color twister tails, gulp minnows, and just kind of keeping those moving until we locate the fish. And the side imaging helps a lot too. We were able to kind of run at 2.5 miles an hour and check some of those weed lines. And if the fish are off the weed edge slightly, they stick out really well in your side imaging. You'll see these little grains of rice, these little slash marks. Then that'll kind of get you in the zone. And then they don't typically move far. They'll slide up and they'll slide down, but it's not like they move across the lake. For instance, there was a big bug hatch and we were on some really big numbers, 60, 70 crappie days, trolling, kind of mud flats with scattered weeds in about 7 feet of water. And we went out there a few days later and those fish just vanished. They were gone. So we got off the deep weed edge and found a point. And every time we troll over that point, it was doubles. Everybody in the boat was hooked up. And so we were able to, spot lock on that point and kind of fan cast it because they were grouped up. And that's typically what you'll find is they're going to be schooled together really tight too. But, keep that trolling motor moving at 1 mile an hour or a little bit, 1 to 1.2, and that'll help you locate those fish. My other suggestion is use plastics because live bait's a real pain. You're going to get caught on a weed and you're going to have to reel up and check if you still have bait. With these plastics, if I get caught in a weed, I just pop that rod tip, pop the weed off, and I'm confident to set the tip back down and keep trolling because I know I'm still going to have bait on there if I don't feel the weed.
Well, in that way, you won't leave a minnow bucket full of minnows in your boat parked in the driveway for a couple of days when you get back, or whatever.
Right,
That's the
exactly.
worst. Leaving, having bait die in your boat on a 90-degree July day or something like that and forgetting about it for a couple of days. Oh, man.
And crappies are so charged up and inquisitive during this warm water period that there's really no reason to use live minnows. There's so many good plastics out there, and other baits too. A flat-sided crankbait is a pretty cool option. We started using a lot of those Euro tackle Z Viber style blade flat-sided crankbait style baits in the winter, and they work really good this time of year too when you're off that edge. The other spot you can look for them where I really like a bait like that is like sand and mud transition areas. You're going to see some big bug hatches there. So if you're coming out and you see slicks with dead bugs all over in the water, check those transition areas. And they show up really nice in your electronics too. In the side imaging, you'll see like a light area that transitions to a dark area. And it's pretty obvious. And those transition areas typically have some big bug hatches over the basin. And you can find those fish there too. But, the weeds are going to be kind of the key to everything. That cabbage and that coontail, and some of the deeper weeds in the lake are often the best. The deepest cabbage in the lake is home a ton of fish.
So when you're trolling around and you come across a school, will you just go back and forth and troll through them a few times, or will you stop and maybe pitch jigs or try to vertically jig over them, or do you just keep trolling around them?
It kind of depends on how many are there. What typically I run into this time of year isn't like a big mega school. I mean, if I see
Spread
a
out.
giant ball of them, then for sure we're gonna go back, spot lock, and pitch jigs and plastics to them, and glide them real slow. Crappies like things that kind of hang there, and so if you use a light jig and let those plastics kind of hang, you're gonna get them to go 99% of the time. But I'm often not finding these mega schools. I'm more finding like loose schools of 5 to 6 fish kind of spread along the area, and that's where the trolling thing really shines. That's when we'll troll over because we can get that bait in front of as many aggressive fish as possible and put the biggest numbers in the boat. And on a lot of these Ottertail County lakes, the cabbage and the coontail edges are pretty expansive. Like, our some of the trolling routes we're making are a mile long, and you're kind of picking up fish throughout. You'll hit a lull and then you'll hit a bunch of fish, and then you'll hit a lull and you'll hit a bunch of fish. And so it just seems like keeping the boat moving is, unless you find, but every scenario is different. I mean, yeah, if I find a mega school where there's 30 fish there, we're just going to go spot lock and pitch up on them. And that's a scenario where if you wanted to fish really slow and throw a bobber, you could do that there too. But what I'm seeing a lot of people doing that are reaching out to me on social media and saying they're struggling for crappies is they're just picking one spot on the weed edge and bobber fishing. And your numbers can be low that way. You're not going to necessarily pick up the big numbers of fish that you're wanting.
Got to keep moving around, find those active fish, I suppose. So when you're trolling around, say that 7-foot mark, do you just try to follow that contour? Do you follow the weed edge? Do you try to stay 5 to 10 feet? What's your target line for trolling?
Yeah, that weed edge is usually kind of what I'm trying to do, and I'm still kind of getting dialed in right now on this. But last year, by August, I had it all mapped out where I had waypoints like around the best cabbage.
Sure.
And so I could even speed up, have everybody keep their jigs in the water, speed up until we get to the next cabbage patch, and then slow the boat down right before we get to it, and everybody's back in the zone. So I could kind of hopscotch them to the best patches of cabbage, and keep them on really good fishing the whole time. But I'm still kind of getting that dialed in. We're kind of going slow now, and I'm just trying to graph out how all this vegetation works down there. But once you really get it mapped out and you kind of know how that cabbage works, you know which ones are going to have fish in them every day, and you can really kind of dial it in and not waste any time in between the best cabbage patches.
Amazing how far electronics have come. Not just showing you depth anymore, and maybe marking something. Is that a fish on there? No, it's so detailed now. It's they're really amazing. And when you start to include, you don't always think of using like say side imaging. I've never really thought about using side imaging when you're fishing, some of that deeper water or looking for, panfish or something like that. I've always associated with like musky fish, looking for big fish or whatever in shallower water. But boy, you can really utilize that side imaging when you're looking for schools of fish like that.
Yeah, they're all going to look like a grain of rice, just a line, a dash, essentially, and they're going to be grouped together. And you can definitely tell it's not bait because it's a bigger mark than that would be, but they're going to be, kind of balled up, and crappies tend to, bluegills tend to kind of stack up horizontally, where crappies tend to kind of stack up vertically, and that's where you can kind of tell the difference too. If they're towering, those are always crappies, just because of the way that they tend to relate to each other in that school.
Interesting.
I know I went on a guided tarpon fishing trip in Florida, and the guy that we went out with, he extensively used side imaging to find these tarpon. And I think most people go on a trip like that and they just kind of sit back in their chair and kind of let the guide, find the fish. But I had to see this with my own eyes, so I'm like right over his shoulder. Probably the worst time find ever. But I'm like right over his shoulder. I'm like, I just want to see what a tarpon looks like on the side imaging. And I mean, it was like when we seen one, I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, it drew out all the fins and the tail. I mean, there was no mistaking what you were looking for there. Where, with crappies, it takes a little more training because you're looking for something that looks like about a grain of rice on your side of it, depending on how big your screen is and what you have and how far out you are. And I tend to run mine out about 60 feet. I run 8s on my boat, 8-inch screens. And if you go out past 60 feet, everything just gets so condense. Sometimes I miss them, but if you run it at 60 feet, you're going to see those crappies. They look like, it's not like a tarpon, but
I want to talk about tarpon for just a second. I mean, this information about crappies and side imaging is great, but tell me about your tarpon trip. Did you get some tarpon?
Well, this was all, last winter when I did this, but yeah, we caught some, and I'm going to try to go again this winter if I can pull it off. It's kind of a nice February getaway to go down to Isla Mirada and get away from the cold for a little bit if you work outside every day, and chase those big fish. And those things are the total package, man. It's like steelhead on steroids. They pull hard, they jump out of the water a lot when you hook them. That's about the funnest thing you can catch, in my opinion.
Well, I was going to ask you that because that's the way they advertise it. They're kind of unique that way. They're about the toughest fish you'll fight. Is that accurate, Garett?
I think there's ocean fish. All ocean fish seem to pull harder than anything we have in freshwater. But as far as tarpon go, I think what the real draw about those are is that they jump. They spend a lot of time out of the water, and it's just a lot of fun. And you've got to not rip the hooks out of their mouth. Like, they have the kind of the paper lip thing like crappies do. And so when they jump, they always, the guide is yelling to you, bow to the silver king. Bow to, so you need to kind of lower your rod tip when the fish is going to come out of the water, just so you don't throw those hooks. You want to keep those rod tips, real low. And so the guide is, kind of screaming at you the entire time to bow to the king. Get your rod tip down, And I think that's fun. We've got like big bull sharks. And I think those pull harder, but they don't jump, they just bulldog around and they'll pull the boat around, and so the captain, you hook a bull shark and the captain's going to chase him with a motor, and if he slows down, you find them they're towing the boat, 7-foot sharks.
You
don't get that so much with tarpon, but they just go berserk and come out of the water.
Ocean fishing is never I've never really said, man, I got to go do that. I'm starting to get that way now based on certain species. Like, I don't want to go out there and fight something for 4 or 5 hours or whatever, no matter how big it is. Maybe one time it'd be kind of cool to catch, a giant tuna or something like that, which we've talked about a tuna trip. That would be pretty cool. But, a tarpon trip, I think, really appeals to me because that sounds like it'd be a fun fight.
Absolutely. And I like the backcountry personally. If I go there more than going out on the ocean side, versus going way out on the ocean, I like to fish in the backcountry where you're in a big mangrove swamp essentially. And there's all kinds of cool stuff back there, from, big redfish and big snook, permit, bonefish, tarpon. And for me, for whatever reason, that's more interesting than going out and catching.
Yeah.
And in Isla Mirada, they do a lot of snappers, groupers, like food fish. Then I'm okay going after these backcountry fish that are typically a catch and release species. That's more interesting to me personally.
Absolutely. Although one of those big groupers would be wild when the fish is like bigger than
one of those Goliaths, that would be pretty cool. Yeah.
We're gonna need a bigger boat. All right, Garett. If people want to go on one of your guided fishing trips in Panfish Paradise there, or maybe start thinking about steelhead a little bit, what should they do?
You can go to my website. It's slabseekerfishing.com. Otherwise, we have a Facebook page. Just search for Slab Seeker Fishing. Got some availability coming up in August.
Okay, August. Slabseekerfishing.com. Garett Svir, thanks for the time today on the show.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me on, Brett. Thanks, Dan.
Did you know there are more than 1,000 lakes in Otter Tail County?
Yep, and I'm going to fish as many as I can. I'm an outdoorsy otter. Nothing beats a full day of fishing for me. The lakes of Otter Tail County give me plenty of options to lower my boat and snag the perfect catch. Not an outdoorsy otter? No problem. Otter Tail County has something for everyone. You just need to find your inner otter. Go to this site right here.
To find your inner otter, go to OttertailLakesCountry.com.
Hear more at SportingJournalRadio.com or wherever you get podcasts.